Hey, I'm just checking to make sure that I am live. Give me just a second, y'all. Just a minute. I'm just checking to make sure that I am live. Give me just a second, y'all. Just a minute. I'm just checking to make. Okay, looks like we're good to go. So, I'm going to keep this pretty short. I know this is an awkward time. This has been a really, really good weekend, and so I haven't had, like, a lot of time to, like, really be online and dedicate time to it, so I'm really sorry about that.
Hear these guys.
And I'll probably explain, like, a little more on that later, at a later date and a later time. I hope you all are having a wonderful weekend. It's just a good time. Our anniversary is Monday. My mom's birthday was a few days ago, and some other things have gone on that have been really, really exciting, and so I've just been basking in the glow that is life, right? But I wanted to come on here and talk about this really quickly. So a lot of people are talking about Robert Smith. He's the billionaire who offered to pay off the student loan debts of the graduating class at Morehouse during his commencement speech very recently, like maybe within the last week or two. And people have given their thoughts on that from different perspectives. And I want to say something from the beginning. As Black women, we should pay very careful attention to the fact that anytime we have an opinion about a Black man and that Black man happens to be in a relationship or marriage with a non-Black woman, people automatically try to shut us down by saying, oh, you just feel this way because of who he's with. So let's understand something, ladies. My thoughts, opinions, concerns, feelings, whatever, have nothing to do with his relationship status. I'm simply trying to point out the hypocrisy of Black men on social media, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. For years, these guys have said, oh, Oprah hates Black men and blah, 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 right? But let's have a conversation about Oprah Winfrey and how she has been donating to Morehouse through her scholarship fund since 1989. Y'all do realize it's 2019, right? So she's been donating to Morehouse for 30 years. 30 years, okay? And she's never received acknowledgement for that. Never received acknowledgement for that. Never, ever by the collective of Black people. Hey, Mika. You know, you have a lot of Black men and then Black women who are Black male identified. Hey, Virgo and Alita. I'm glad you guys are up on the late night with me. I'm on the East Coast, so it's like, it's 11:42 p.m. here. But people have hated Oprah for really no reason. And this situation with Morehouse is a glaring example because literally since 1989, she has been donating to a scholarship fund that she created specifically for Black male students who attend Morehouse. Okay? And so you have this guy during his commencement speech very recently who said he's going to pay off the student loan debt of everyone in the graduating class. I just want to point out a couple things. For this current school year, the tuition at Morehouse is $48,500. That tuition fee is maybe $4,000 to $5,000 less than the tuition you would pay at a lot of Ivy League colleges. Now, a lot of people who graduated from HBCUs, including the one I'm married to that's downstairs right now, will point out that, oh, Black students don't have as much money for college as other students, and Black students tend to have more student loan debt than other students, right? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, why are some of our HBCUs charging pretty much the same thing that you would pay at an Ivy League college? And are the career outcomes of a student with a degree from, say, Morehouse the same as the career and economic outcomes of a student with a degree from Princeton, Yale, Stanford, Brown, or any of the other Ivy League schools? And if not, a conversation could be had about why they're charging so much tuition, right? Another conversation that could be had is, why do you have families sending their students to colleges that are nearly $50,000 a year? I'm going to tell you my own personal experience. I applied to a couple of colleges when I was starting, maybe like after my sophomore year, like the summer before my junior year in high school. And there was one HBCU in particular that I really, really wanted to go to, but the scholarship and grant money that I was offered would have only covered half the tuition. So it was more financially beneficial to me to go to what's called a PWI, a predominantly white institution, because I had to pay less money out of pocket. And mind you, I graduated in the top 10% of my class, really like the top 8% of my graduating high school class. So it was more financially beneficial for me to not attend the HBCU that I really, really wanted to go to. I am my mom and dad's oldest child, so I had younger siblings coming up behind me. And it was like, it was a lot that went into my decision to go to a PWI. So there's a conversation that could be had about why some of these HBCUs are charging the same thing that you would pay to go to an Ivy League college if your career and economic outcomes wouldn't be the same. I'm not going to have that conversation here. One thing I want to point out, right, is one thing that we saw play out on YouTube for weeks is this whole debate between educated lames and pookies and rayrays, right? And a conversation that we had here on this channel pointed out how the educated lames and pookies and rayrays were on the same page. And in the chat, you wonderful, amazing ladies pointed it out, how they're on the same team. And the term that a young lady named Miss Divine Brown used was that these guys are pretty much playing good cop and bad cop, okay? So before I go any further, I want to acknowledge everyone that's in the chat. Oh, you're on a boat. Alita, I know you were looking for my live earlier, but like something really, really, really exciting happened earlier today, and I'll talk about it in the upcoming months. But something happened that was very exciting earlier today that I was just like, okay, I have to put everything on hold. It's 5 a.m. in the UK. Wow. Virgo, thank you for being up with us. You're right, Mika. We can't do enough, and we'll get into that. Hey, psychologist. Hey, Tiger Lily. Hey, Chaz. Oh, I'm so glad y'all are up. I'm so glad y'all are up. So, I was thinking about something with this educated lame and pookie and rayray debate, and how, in the last, leading up to the last presidential election, you had a lot of these guys taking on conservative talking points, right? And for people who are truly conservative, they don't believe in handouts. They don't believe in people not paying their own way. So for people who are really, really conservative, the idea of wiping out people's student debt for families who chose to send their kids to schools that are like $50,000 a year is just abhorrent. Okay. And another thing I thought of is you probably had some kids at that graduation ceremony who had worked hard to maintain the GPA, to continue to qualify for their scholarships and grants. You probably had students who paid their way through college with work studies. And you probably had some other students who paid their way through college because their families sacrificed and paid out of pocket for whatever wasn't covered by scholarships and grants. So those were the students who, during their 4 or 5 years in college, probably didn't have a vehicle, right? Or if they had a car, it was an older model. The students who their clothes were not up to date. And you know how we are. A lot of us as Black people are very label conscious. So the students who wore shoes and people looked at them and were like, what are those? The kids who had those moments, who would have fell into the educated lame category. And those students were sitting at that graduation ceremony as they and their families had worked super, super hard to make sure that they didn't have any debt. And they listened to this man say, I'm going to wipe out the debt for these people who came from families who were not financially responsible enough to tell their kids, you don't need to go to a school that's $50,000 a year when we don't have a way to pay this back, right? When we have no plan in place to pay this back, we don't have a college fund for you, you graduate from college and you're really going to have like somewhere around $195,000 plus worth of debt. No, we just wiped all of that out for you. But a lot of these Black men who took on conservative talking points when it meant for them that there was a possibility that Black women would suffer, they then changed the goalpost and changed the narrative when it's a situation that would be beneficial to the young Black men and their families who were not financially responsible enough to look at their situation and say, well, we can't afford nearly $50,000 a year. And some of these guys talking about Robert Smith apparently aren't familiar with him because in 2015 or 2016, when he gave a donation to Cornell, which is the college that he got his bachelor's degree from, he donated $50 million to Cornell for STEM programs for, what they call women and minorities, which translation, when they say women, that's white women, and minorities is anyone who is not a white woman or a white man. When he donated $50 million to Cornell, he gave in a way that would have benefited like engineering, research, science, technology, so on and so forth. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this $40 million grant that you're supposedly creating to wipe out the student loan debt for this particular class of students at Morehouse, What would have been more beneficial to an HBCU? Wiping out student loan debt or donating to their endowment fund? Donating to their scholarship fund or creating a scholarship fund like Oprah did? Creating a scholarship fund so that you're promoting academic excellence so that the young Black men who attend Morehouse, instead of getting into debt that they can't pay back, you create a situation where they have to maintain good grades and a good GPA, and they have to be responsible enough to study and do that and so on and so forth. And their reward is a scholarship. So when we have these conversations about how a lot of times educated lames and pookies and rayrays are on the same side, and they often agree with each other, and they often support each other, this whole situation with Robert Smith is playing out on a worldwide stage for Black women to see. To see that in this particular situation, because it's benefiting Black men, no one's going to sit around, these Black men are not going to sit around and point out, well, what does this do for the young Black men who were responsible enough to not get into debt in the first place? The Washington Post, New York Times, and I believe Fox News ran a story about one particular young Black man who had to leave Morehouse because of how much his college debt was. And he was saying, well, wow, if I had stayed at Morehouse, I would have graduated this year and had my debt wiped out. You had other people pointing out that some of these students were in debt because they had like Parent Plus loans, or maybe they possibly borrowed more money than they actually needed for their tuition and fees. And people wanted to know, like, okay, are you going to wipe out all of their debt? Are you only going to wipe out the debt that's associated with their tuition and fees? And why not donate to Morehouse in a similar way that you did with Cornell? You know, donate in a way where you're basically investing in the academic programs and the engineering and other STEM-related programs that would be more beneficial to the college and to the students, instead of just wiping out people's student loan debt. And then my question is, why aren't these men who took the side of the educated lames, why aren't they pointing out that, okay, the students at that graduation, right, who didn't take out student loans, who did the responsible thing and they worked their way through college, or they had families who saved enough money for them so that they didn't have to get into debt, or the students who worked their behinds off to remain eligible for their scholarships and grants, you know, why aren't these men who took the side of the educated lames why aren't they pointing out that by just writing a blank check to pay off the student loans of people who were too irresponsible to realize that they couldn't afford to attend a college that's nearly $50,000 a year, why aren't they pointing out that what Robert Smith did plays into what they say happens amongst the Black collective a lot of times? You know, people on this platform have pointed out that amongst the Black collective, when you are the child or the young adult who's responsible, you don't get any support. You certainly don't get any financial donations from your family, but your family loves the ones who aren't responsible, who make poor decisions, who get into debt, they're in and out of jail, or they're in other situations where they pretty much take on more than they can afford, and the Black collective supports those people Why aren't the people who typically make those arguments pointing out that Robert Smith's donation to just wipe out people's student loan debt is playing into this larger idea, right? That the responsible Black people don't get support and we sit by and watch people who are irresponsible just have all their stuff paid off for them. It's because like we had the conversation on this channel. We said it here. The educated lames and the pookies and rayrays are on the same team. And that's why when it comes to these real life situations, they never call each other out. And because this particular guy happens to be married to a non-Black woman, any critique of him is boiled down to, oh, you have a problem with his wife. No, we're pointing out that typically you men say the quote unquote responsible Black men don't get any support. And the so-called educated lames at that Morehouse graduation would have been the ones who were responsible enough, or they came from families who were responsible enough to not get into that type of debt. Oh, so let's look at the chat, you guys. Oh, a music cruise, Alita. That sounds fun. Oh, it starts at 4 a.m. Okay, so you're going to be cutting up tonight, Alita. Okay. Right, Mika. These colleges are charging an arm and a leg. And I just have to think to myself, like, okay, if you have a Black child, right? And they're at the point where they're a year or so from graduation and they have really good grades, and there are some great HBCUs that you would want to send them to, but they could go to a PWI and not get into the same amount of debt. How come no one looks at those HBCUs and says, okay, you don't have the same outcomes career-wise and economically for your graduating students, but you would want to charge me the same thing as an Ivy League college, but if I send my kid to an Ivy League college, they're a minority there, and so they qualify for more scholarships. You're right, Kai colleges, they don't give adequate financial aid unless you are if you're a non-Black person and you attend a HBCU, you can get a lot of financial aid. But outside of that, if you are a Black student attending an HBCU, you don't get financial aid, not anything that would really put a dent in the debt. Oh, you freezing right now, Lita. Well, I bet once you dance a little bit, you'll warm up a little. That's a good point, Chaz. A lot of students now go the community college route, and then once they get their associate's degree, in some states, they basically have these programs where if you have a community college associate's degree, and then you go to a public university, you're only a couple classes away from getting your bachelor's degree, and you save a lot of money that way. I didn't know it at the time, but some people I know went that route, and they saved a lot of money. Yeah, you're right, Chaz. Middle class people do get screwed when it comes to financial aid. Tiger Lily, yeah. Yeah, you said you didn't go to an HBCU either. Many of your friends complained about the high cost, financial aid issues, and condition of the colleges and universities. Yep, because Home Depot, I want to say it was like maybe a year or two ago, where Home Depot basically had this thing where they had a couple of different HBCUs, and you had to like vote. And the HBCU with the most votes would get like free renovations from Home Depot. And I'm like, okay, I'm not voting for one of these schools where the tuition is $40,000 plus a year. Because for all colleges, you know, attending college is a moneymaker. So I'm like, okay, what are you doing with this money? And why do these groups like Home Depot have to step in and pay for your upgrades? That's very true, Chaz. Chaz, he gave $70 million to USC. Chaz, like, no one knows how it's gonna work. You said, isn't it actually a grant they have to apply for? It doesn't apply. It doesn't pay back parent loans. Like, that's one of the questions people have. Is it going to pay back parent loans and the logistics of how those payments are going to work? No one knows. Because during his commencement speech, he made the offer, but didn't have a plan in place. So it remains to be seen how this is going to work. Yeah, it probably is going to be a tax write-off. Probably is going to be a tax write-off. I see your point, Alita. Like, I don't care who they spend their money on, but the point is these same Black men who are praising Robert Smith have harassed Oprah for years because she has done certain things for Black women and girls, but they ignore the ways that she has also helped Black men. They completely ignore the fact that that scholarship fund that she created for Morehouse has existed since 1989. She gave her first donation to Morehouse in 1989, which was $1 million. And her scholarship fund has put over 400 men through college at Morehouse. And people completely ignore that. But because you have this particular Black guy come along who says, oh, I'm going to wipe out your student loan debt, he's a messiah who deserves all this praise for one particular act when people don't know the logistics of how this is going to work. When, to me, scholarship funds promote, like I said, academic excellence and responsibility. When you wipe out the debt of people who were irresponsible enough to acquire $50,000 of college debt per year, it doesn't teach them anything. All it does is it makes the other students who are responsible enough to not get into that debt look around and feel like, okay, I did the right thing, and I pretty much have nothing to show for it. Oh, psychologist, you said, just goes to show that Blacks will settle for symbolism over true progress. He is very wealthy. He could do both, actually pay off their debts and create a scholarship or endowment. That's true. My husband attended and graduated from an HBCU. And one of the conversations we had, they got very heated, right? Because I graduated from a school that's a PWI, because I couldn't afford to pay the tuition at an HBCU versus getting a lot of scholarship and grant money at a PWI. But one of the things I pointed out to him is that at my alma mater, a lot of people donate thousands of dollars every year. And a lot of people, like when they die, they leave a portion of their estates to certain colleges. And I was like, okay, what I look at when I see HBCUs is like they got they got billions of dollars from Obama, and then they were back at the White House with the current president, Donald Trump, and were upset because they weren't going to get additional money. And I was like, okay, what are they doing to build their endowments? And what about alumni donations? Like, why are these schools relying so heavily on government funding? Why are they relying so heavily on government funding instead of the students who graduated from those schools valuing the institutions enough to create scholarship funds and to donate consistently so that you don't have students going to these schools where the tuition is nearly $50,000 a year, where the average student attending these schools can't afford to pay that. You're right, Chaz. A lot of the Black women encourage the BS. Yep, Tiger Lily, there are going to be some stipulations and conditions. And a lot of these people don't realize it. They think it's just a blank check that's going to pay off everything. No. For the students who borrowed more money than what they needed, they're probably going to have to pay that back, and they should. Because I'm telling you guys, if you weren't on YouTube, like, it's really hard to explain it, but a lot of these Black men were taking on conservative talking points and saying they were voting for Donald Trump because they felt like Black women received too many handouts from the government, which is not true. When it comes to welfare and other programs, the overwhelming majority of the people who receive those benefits are not Black women. But people were taking on those talking points and saying, well, yeah, Black women want the rest of society to pay for their irresponsibility. And it's like, okay, well, if that's what you believe, wouldn't you be amongst a lot of people? Because there's a lot of people pointing this out. Wouldn't you be amongst the people saying, okay, this guy wiping out the student loan debt for people who couldn't afford to attend a university that's nearly $50,000 a year? Wouldn't you point out that that money would have been better used by investing in the school or investing in a scholarship program so you could promote academic excellence instead of financial irresponsibility? Psychologist, oh, you said his second wife is known by a few NBA ballers. Listen, at this point, when I see those situations, I'm like, okay, girl, do your thing. Hopefully Black women will learn also to not marry based on potential. Right? You're right, Chaz. The women do support pookie behavior. Because, like, they literally just sat on here and had this educated lame versus pookie and rayray debate. And it's like, okay, well, if you're someone who views yourself as a Black man who's an educated lame, wouldn't you be pointing out that the educated lames at this graduation who were responsible enough to not get into debt graduated and basically were slapped in the face, right? Because the pookies and rayrays who were so irresponsible that they got student loans for a college that's nearly $50,000 a year, knowing they had no way to pay for it, basically had their debt wiped out. Good night, Alita. Have a good time. Psychologist, you said your friends who went to HBCUs had massive debt. Yeah, because you don't get a lot of financial aid at HBCUs now unless you're not Black. That's the irony. Like, the same people who say that they need more money from state and federal governments, you know, because they recognize that a lot of Black people come from families where we can't afford to pay a lot of tuition. Psst. Okay, but what they leave out is that at an HBCU, your Black behind is not a minority. So most of the financial aid is going to go to people who are not Black. And so that's where my question comes in. If you are charging students, see, if you're charging students the same amount of tuition and fees that they would pay in an Ivy League college, and my kid, I don't have any kids, but just theoretically, my kid goes to your school, but they don't have the same career and economic outcomes that they would have if they went to an Ivy League college, then my question becomes, why are you charging so much money in tuition? Where is this money going to? And this one particular person paying off the student loan debt for this graduating class doesn't address the larger issue of you're charging me Ivy League tuition, and I'm not having the same outcomes as I would have had if I had gone to an Ivy League university. Alpha Omega said, I'm not usually a fan of giving freebies to people already set to do well. I'm just pointing out that a lot of these people making these arguments for the educated lanes were saying, well, amongst the Black collective, the irresponsible Black people are the ones who get support. But in this particular situation with Robert Smith, because it's Black men who are benefiting, no one's going to call it out who's taking on those arguments. And the Black women who defend these guys are not calling that out. Wow, Chaz, you said you worked for your university during grad school for a program that pretty much offered free tuition, room and board for migrants. I'm telling you. You know, a lot of people wonder why a lot of Black students don't go to HBCUs. It's simply not affordable. You said, Mika said, I wonder if paying off massive college debt can be paid in a timely manner and not take someone's entire lifetime to pay off. That's a good question, Mika. I had a pretty small amount of student loan debt, and my student loan debt wasn't paid off until I got married. You know, people, even if your student loan debt is like, say, $10,000 or $15,000 or less, when you have rent or a mortgage payment and other bills, that's a lot to have to pay off. So I can't imagine people paying off like, you know, $50,000 plus dollars, especially from universities who, where most of their students are going to be Black students, and they'll point out, well, we need more money because most of our students don't have enough money to attend college, and Black students have more student loan debt than white students. Then it's like, okay, so why doesn't your tuition match the economic outcomes that your students will face? Yeah, Alpha Omega, it does seem that like now with college, it just seems like the student loan thing is an automatic attachment. And no one looks at these HBCUs that charge nearly $50,000 a year and says, you know, does your tuition need to be this much? Does your tuition and fees need to be nearly as much as I would pay if I sent my kid to a HBCU? I mean, to an Ivy League college. Oh, but if my kid did really, really well in high school and I sent him to an Ivy League college, most of their tuition and fees would be paid for in scholarships and grants. Because that's another thing. That's another conversation. You know, if your kid graduates from high school with like a 3.6 or a 3.7, they go to a HBCU and they're going to have to pay at least 50% of the tuition and fees. If they went to an Ivy League college, at least 80% of their tuition and fees would be paid in grants and scholarships. Alpha Omega said you had to spend 10 years paying off your loans. So to make this into a lottery handout, yeah. I feel you. I can care less if your feelings is in the building. You're right. That $50,000 could go towards opening a small business. Very true. Or imagine what, like, if he had done something similar to what he did with Cornell. Imagine what a $40 or $50 million donation to, like, the STEM programs at Morehouse would have meant to that school. Yes, Tamika, that's a good question. What are the schools doing with the money? If most of your students are acquiring massive debt, right? There's not enough scholarship money to go around, and the career outcomes for those students do not match other schools with similar tuition, then what are the schools doing with the money? Is the Black collective overlooking the fact that HBCUs, just like other colleges, are making money off of their students? And are HBCUs using their status as respectable universities that have a historical significance? Are they using that status to financially take advantage of their students? You know? You're right, colleges. Black women better learn sooner or later. Yes, Mika, Black women aren't lazy. We work hard, most of us. But some of these questions still have to be asked to me. Right, Tiger Lily, at that cost for a degree, employment with a high salary needs to be guaranteed. If you're paying nearly $50,000 a year for tuition, okay, that college needs to pretty much be able to guarantee you that they can connect you with career resources where you're going to be making at least $300,000 a year. But a lot of people in the Black collective don't understand money, right? So a lot of Black people think that $50,000, $60,000 a year is a lot of money. No, it's not. If your student loan debt is $100,000 plus, you have to pay your student loan repayment is probably going to be something like $700 or $800 a month, on top of rent or mortgage, car payment if you have one, other bills. And let's talk about the fact that if your salary isn't that high and you have that much debt, your debt to income ratio is going to be so high that a mortgage is not going to happen because no bank is going to lend you money for a home. High-end apartment complexes aren't going to rent to you. When your student loan debt is that high and you're a few months behind on it, your credit is going to take a nosedive. So there are going to be certain jobs that you can't get. So why are people overlooking these conversations simply because you had a billionaire step in who said he's going to pay off the student loan debt for the graduating class? Like, why are they ignoring these larger conversations? True, Chaz. Pookie cannot pay any bills. I can care less said, why would any Black woman want to go to a HBCU? It's a waste of time and a waste of money. At this particular point, if they're charging you the tuition of an Ivy League college and you don't have the same career opportunities as you would have if you went to an Ivy League school, then you're absolutely right. It's not worth the money. And yep, Morehouse is a Black male college. So you're right. A lot of the colleges weren't built for Black women. Hey, too pretty to be petty. Chaz said these women don't understand that a man providing for his family is not going to be able to run around screaming Black power. There are smarter ways to address many of these issues. That's true. I Can Care Less said a lot of these colleges are a waste of time if they're not teaching Black women how to manage their credit, teaching about business ownership. That's very true. You said you're better off going to a 2-year community college, getting a nursing, computer, or technical degree at your local community college. In this day and age, that is very true. If you're not getting a 4-year degree in like a STEM-related field, or maybe I think there are people who get degrees in like, what is it called? Radiology and stuff like that. Or like an obstetrician tech or stuff like that. Like those type of degrees are very good and you're guaranteed to make a lot of money. But outside of that, with a lot of these degrees, you get a lot of debt and your salary isn't even enough to live off of and pay your student loans back. Too Pretty to Be Petty said there's more to the reasoning behind this. That's interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the chat. Megan said, I've had to tone down on listening to the rhetoric of the so-called pro-Black folks because it was giving you headaches and draining me. Yeah, I feel you. It is good to distance from the BS. That's very true. Psychologist said there's a lot of anti-Black propaganda that Blacks internalize, and some of the pro-Black rhetoric can be very dismissive of the Black woman in general. That's very true. Yep, I Can Care Less. $60,000 is considered poor in LA. And in a lot of places, that's not really enough to live off of anymore, especially for people who have families. That's very true. Hey, Soul Sessions. Psychologist said college is a scam, so much debt and barely getting by. Yeah, for people who get degrees in fields that are not financially, where you don't get a whole lot of money, it's very true. I do feel like Black women, we need to be more strategic about our education. I think education can afford you a lot of economic opportunities, but your education has to be in the right fields. Chaz said a lot of pro-Black rhetoric is about Black men posturing and mimicking a version of white supremacist rhetoric, the version that includes Black men. It's purely performative. How has it helped? That's very true. You have a lot of Black men on a platform that was created by white men, right? YouTube, saying, oh, we don't want Black women in our spaces. I don't understand why Black women would want to be in their spaces, but I think to myself, it's not your space when you didn't create the platform. Soul Session said online universities are where it's at, 1/3 the payment, done in 7 months. I think that can help a lot as long as, like, universities have different accreditation levels. So if you attend an online university, but you pretty much plan to stay like in the state that you're in, I think that's a good point. If you attend an online university, but you plan to possibly move to a different part of the country, it's important to make sure that that university is, I think, what's called regionally accredited, so that degree will be accepted wherever you go across the country. But outside of that, a lot of times online, you do pay less. I Can Care Less said pro-Black is pro-Black men only. Very true. And you know this because when you have people and they do things and their charity is specifically directed at Black men, pro-Blacks will say, oh, well, this is beneficial to Black people, right? But if you do something and that charitable donation goes directly to Black women or Black children, then people will say that you're anti-Black male because the charity isn't specifically directed at Black men. So that means that pro-black is inherently pro-black male. And so to me, for any black woman who cares about black women and black children, you can't really be pro-black because you won't be allowed or supported when you try to do things to address the issues that black women and children, specifically black girls, face. That's true, Chaz. They kill everyone black. Too Pretty to Be Petty says the pro-black community is always caping for non-black people on the down low, especially the non-black women. That's very true. Okay, Soul Sessions said in the UK is less costly. Wow, so what time is it there? Like 4 or 5 in the morning? Okay. One thing I went to, it's been a long time since I was in the UK. I did a study abroad there the summer after my freshman year in college. And one thing I loved was that, like, it didn't seem to get dark until after 10 or 11 o'clock at night because we were there in the summer. That was fun. I can care less. Okay. Yeah, I've heard about Black Junction, but a lot of black men don't seem to support it. I've heard people say that the functionality isn't the same as YouTube. Oh, really, psychologist? Your name is, that's a beautiful name. That's a good point, Chaz. Question if mental health needs to come first. You said, isn't the guy who gave the money married to a non-black woman? Yes, Too Pretty to Be Petty. But people, people are saying he's pro-black because he wiped out the student loan debt of people who were so financially irresponsible that they went to a school that's nearly $50,000 a year, knowing they had no way to pay it back. Okay, you said it's almost 7 a.m. Wow, that's early. I can care less. They are selfish. Very, 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 very. And the narrative and the goalpost changes depending on the situation. Because if there were really black men on this platform who identified as educated lames, they would be pointing out, okay, if I'm an educated lame at this graduation who is responsible enough to not get into debt to attend this university, I would feel very slighted by the fact that these people who got into debt pretty much just had it wiped out. I'd feel very slighted by the fact that I was responsible enough to not get into the debt. And as usual, as it plays out a lot of times amongst the Black collective, when you're responsible, when you do the right thing, you don't have much to show for it. And anytime there's any quote unquote help, it goes to the people who were too irresponsible to avoid getting in bad situations. Too Pretty to Be Petty? Yes. Morehouse, I think, is accepting transgendered males. So, Chad said basically the focus needs to be on having kids who are raised in an environment where they can actually value themselves and practice Black self-respect, and they will go on to do the same thing. That's true, Chaz. Unfortunately, at this point, I do believe that most Black men don't value the concept of a Black family enough to care about that. But yeah, that's mostly where the change would need to be. But I just wanted to speak briefly. See, I'm the only person who would talk for like an hour and be like, oh, I'm just speaking briefly. But I wanted to talk about my thoughts on this situation, because it's just odd to me that these men spent weeks going back and forth supposedly on educated lames and pookies and rayrays, but in a situation where a black man is literally encouraging financial irresponsibility. They all come together and say, oh no, this is a good thing. And when you have any critique, their way of trying to shut you down is, oh, you only have a problem with this because of who his wife is. And it's like, no, we're pretty accustomed to the fact that many of you want to breed yourselves out by dealing with non-black women. So we're used to that. But what we're pointing out is, at least here on this channel, is what about the students who attended that graduation who didn't get into debt? You know, what about the fact that you just had these HBCU presidents in the White House with President Donald Trump upset because they felt like they weren't getting enough money, because what Donald Trump basically told them is, well, you need to develop strategic partnerships with businesses so that you can find ways to grow your endowments, right? But they just sat in the White House with President Donald Trump upset after they had received a truckload of money from the previous president, basically saying, well, we need more money. And it's like, well, okay, if you're charging people nearly $50,000 a year, what are you doing with that money, especially if the students who graduate from your college aren't getting the same outcomes that they would have gotten if they had taken that money and spent it at an Ivy League college? Very true. I can care less. We don't care if he's married to a non-black woman. And you said the question you want to know is, why do black women care? They're not our men and it's not our fight. Very true. Chaz said no poverty babies. She actually said a 2-kid maximum and none before the age of 30 or 35 for black men. That's a good point. Psychologist said, Frances Cress Welsing, you believe this was part of her plan to help black people? Mm-hmm. Okay, you're in Cali. I can care less. Too pretty to be petty said that college used to be strongly against the LGBT community, but something has happened. Well, they want more people to pay that $50,000 a year tuition. That's what it is. Yeah, psychologist is $12.35 here too. I can care less. Said they're not educated lames, they're educated niggas. They're Pookie and Ray in a suit and speak proper English. Yes, and we had that conversation here on this channel, how they're on the same team. The same team. Chaz said, funny how many of them placed an importance on birthing responsibly for quality, not quantity. Yes, a lot of us do unfortunately ignore that. And you think black women should follow her rules, even if the husband is not black. Very true. Soul Session said, come to Europe, lots of Arab, Italian businessmen who value marriage and fatherhood and hearts. So that's very good. I can care less that the black females who are black male identified need to be sterilized. Yeah. I mean, something definitely, you know how it is when you say stuff on this platform, but yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you because there's a lot of stuff that goes on that they simply refuse to point out. And so they're complicit in a lot of the ways that black women and black girls are damaged. All right, y'all. Well, this was just a quick late night live. I'm going to try to go live again before, for those of you in the UK, in the US, it's Memorial Day weekend. So I'm going to try to go live before Memorial Day weekend ends. I'm off work until Tuesday. My anniversary is Monday. So we didn't take a trip this year because like a lot happened. Like our dog died on a Sunday, and then the next day, one of my husband's uncles passed away. So it's just been like, this is like the first time in the last maybe 2 weeks where we've had time to take a breather. So for our anniversary, we're probably just going to go out to the pier, and my husband's going to go fishing and grabbing, and I'm just going to sit by the water and watch the people on their speedboats. And we'll probably just grill some food. But I'm going to try to come back on before Tuesday just to chat with y'all. Thank you. Yes, psychologists, ring before the babies. Now, this is nothing against Black women who are single moms. I am just saying, if you are not already a mom, then it's going to be best to wait until you're with a man who has married you and who's able to provide for you and whatever children that you have. So yes, we're gonna just hang out at the pier and probably just put some stuff on the grill and just take a breather and relax. But thank all of you for being here and participating in the conversation live. For anyone who catches the playback, please share your thoughts in the comment sections, and I will respond to all of you. And I will talk to you all soon. I hope you guys have a great weekend, a wonderful night, or if you're on the East Coast of the US, it's already early Sunday morning. And for our friends who are in Europe, it's already the early hours of the morning. So for those of us on the East Coast or those in the UK, it's good morning. And I will talk to you all soon.